All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal, and please click like and subscribe before you get too into this video and you don't even think about it. I really do appreciate your support, and this is how you can manifest it. Doesn't cost nothing. Just go ahead, click that like, subscribe in the bottom right of your screen right now. Let me start with a quick, and I've been doing this, I do this on occasion, not all the time, but when there's a comment on my last program, my last live stream, I often entertain those before I get into the topics of the day. So let me start again with a comment from last week's last program, where I spent quite a lot of time going through Jimmy Dore's recent video where he was harshly critical, unfairly critical, ultimately dishonest in his attacks on Greta Thunberg, the heroic climate activist from Sweden who pretty much, I would say more than anybody else, really does walk the walk that she talks. More so for sure than I do. And she's much more effective and impactful than I am too. I was very upset. I really was. I'm personally upset by the fact that Jimmy Dore, somebody that I do in the past often cite to for being formative in terms of my live streaming, and also for getting things right and speaking truth to power on many issues. So Jimmy Dore has been a very important and very valuable and very honest, for the most part, light in our increasingly dark media firmament. But he got this wrong. He just did. And he got it terribly wrong. And he got it wrong because maybe there's envy that Greta Thunberg is impactful. Maybe it's envy because she's really an honest person. She's not in it for herself, and he has trouble, viewing people as, with an unjaundiced eye. Let's put it that way. Maybe because she spoke at Davos. I really don't know. And in the end, it ultimately doesn't matter very much why he was so wrong-headed, and really dangerously so, because he is fanning the flames of climate denialism as our planet is literally engulfed in flames caused by the human anthropogenic climate cataclysm. So Jimmy is really harming the progressive movement. He's harming the planet by casting doubt on a luminary in the fight against fossil fuel destruction. So, I'm not going to be, I don't give him any passes. I don't give anybody any passes. But I thought this comment on my Facebook page was very apt, and I really appreciated it. So here's what they had to say. Jimmy's not the only one to lose his mind. And that's a direct reference to my comment that Jimmy lost his mind when he attacked Greta Thunberg for her climate activism. And he used it as an opportunity to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the war against fossil fuels. So the commenter on Facebook noted, Jimmy's not the only one to lose his mind. There are others I used to respect for their independence of thought, but they were so attacked by the left that over time they have found acceptance on the right and then have started to be influenced by the right to the point that they no longer make sense much of the time. I throw on that Pike, Jordan Peterson, and Russell Brand. So I'm not really too familiar with Peterson. Brand a little bit. I guess he's some sort of a actor and comic who has become a bit of a pundit. I haven't noticed him moving much to the right. So I'll take the word of the commentator, who I know for a fact is extremely well informed and extremely intelligent in their analyses. So, okay. I was immediately thinking of Tulsi Gabbard, who, to the great joy, I think, of many progressives, endorsed Bernie in 2016, spoke truth to power. She was so reviled by the Democratic Party, I believe, that she ultimately just simply walked away completely. And that's fine. I don't, there's no reason not to walk away from the Democrats. The problem is that she also embraced Republican views, rejecting, for example, Medicare for all, to which, be fair, she had never been that, closely aligned, and she always seemed a bit lukewarm even when she endorsed it. But she has been a voice for peace, and I do give Tulsi a lot of credit. But yeah, she does seem to have moved to the right. This is what happens. This is what happens when we cancel people because they take on the Democratic Party. They get so frustrated, so upset that they think, well, the people who are canceling me must be wrong about everything. That's on us. Well, not on me, but it's on those who accept the any blue will do mantra, who the second somebody criticizes a Democrat immediately attack them. That's a huge disservice to our movement. If you care about the planet, if you care about the people on it, if you care about the environment, if you care about Medicare for all, student debt, poverty, then you have an absolute duty not to cancel progressives, not to cancel people who take on the elites in the Democratic Party just because you fear that might enable or empower Trump. Well, too bad. The reason Trump and DeSantis are empowered is because the Democrat Party doesn't fight for poor, struggling, and working people. So this was a great comment. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Did want to, I guess, is platform the right word? I did want to platform the speaker of that comment and also present their well-taken position on why we have to look at Jimmy Dore's career in context and not simply bash him or reject everything he has to say or cancel him because he got wrong, very, very wrong, very badly wrong, the climate catastrophe. Okay, so this topic, my main topic today, is it's globally how our war, the proxy war, the democratic support for the war in Ukraine has destabilized the world and has led to atrocities, or certainly exacerbated carnage and increased the number of atrocities around the world. We are certainly seeing this in Darfur. And I think I mentioned before that one thing I like about doing this program, one of the benefits for me, is I'm much better informed, I believe, than I would otherwise be. I mean, when I was acting as an organizer for our revolution, honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time reading the newspaper. Really didn't. I mean, I might look for my name in it if I gave a speech or if I was on a call that was covered by the media. Sure, I looked for me, but I wasn't informing myself of the news to the degree that I do now. And I think that this is a plus, right? That for me to, personally, obviously I couldn't do this live stream if I wasn't familiar with the news of the day. But I think it's good for me just to be better informed, period, regardless of doing this live stream. That said, there are some downsides. And one is it's just really depressing. I mean, I'm probably even more depressed with the state of the world today than I was 6 months ago or a year ago when I was working full time as an organizer. It's really awful. I mean, what you learn when we learn about what we're doing with regard to the planet, with regard to the climate catastrophe, and what we're doing to human beings around the planet, it's heartbreaking. I mean, if you're a caring person, I think most of us are. I think most of us shut our eyes to this stuff. I think that's why so many of us also embrace conspiracy theories about the planet, about the climate, that somehow we're not getting the whole story. It's really not so bad. It's actually getting cooler. Noah isn't telling us, or Noah is telling this and the media isn't. I think we embrace these clearly bogus stories that are told for the purpose of the elites because it's so painful to realize how bad things are. I think that those of you who insist in the teeth of evidence to the contrary that the Democrats are on your side, it's because it's too painful to acknowledge that no one's on your side, that we're really alone. The only people we have are those around us and those that we can ally with politically who aren't in it for themselves. And there aren't a lot of people like that. Dr. West is one of them, so vote for him, please. In Africa, in, I guess it's Central East Africa, if you look at a map, South Saharan, Sub-Saharan region, Sudan, Darfur, and I guess, I've always kind of wondered exactly where Darfur is, but it's a small area. I guess it's kind of an independent state in the southern half of Sudan, maybe completely covered, surrounded by Sudan, or maybe South Sudan is on its southern border. So the Fur people have been in the news in and out for decades now because of the murders, the genocides, the rapes of those folks there. And it's to a large degree a religious war. The Muslims and non-Muslims are fighting with each other, killing each other. It's awful. That also is exacerbated by the periodic drought in the region, so there's limited resources, and there's killing for those resources. Also, rapes are used as an instrument of terror. So it's just awful. The post-colonial Africa is in many ways, the area where we see the worst ravages of colonialism, the control that was taken by European countries of the continent, the corruption, the hoarding of resources, the destruction of any kind of native institutions that could maintain order, peace, justice, the use of competing warlords to maintain strife and chaos, thereby benefiting the overlords from Europe, and we continue to see that. So that's what's the situation right now in Sudan and South Sudan and Darfur, and it's awful. And this is, I'm not saying this is caused by, obviously this was happening before the Ukraine war, but the Ukraine war is part of it, is worsening the situation. Our support for endless war, our continuing to provide military materiel, weaponry of destruction, and maintaining conflict rather than insisting on a ceasefire, rather than joining with China, India, and going to the United Nations and pushing for peacekeeping forces in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia is part of the reason we're seeing an uptick in violence, a significant reason for the uptick in violence in South Sudan region, Darfur region. So this is from your New York Times. And I mentioned the article, I showed you the screen from Lydia Polgreen. This is in, the 23rd, right? So this is the Sunday magazine that was online on Friday, but published, I believe, yesterday in the hard copy edition. And what Polgreen has to talks about there, I'm not going to go through her whole article like I do sometimes, but I just want to give you a background, maybe play a video for you. What's happening? So since April of 2023, 3 months ago, Sudan has been racked by a wave of horrific violence. And what you're seeing is a power struggle between two former allies, two former military tyrants, Burhan, al-Burhan, and Hamdan, who has a nickname. And they worked together to depose a previous dictator, Bashir, al-Bashir, and they have been now training their troops on each other. The result has been 2.5 million Sudanese have fled their homes just since April, with over 1,000 killed. And I think I've seen numbers up to 3,000 deaths. Massive, widespread homelessness and displacement and misery. And what Paul Green is saying is this could ultimately lead to really a world war through Africa and the Middle East, so spanning 2 continents. The Civil War, rape is significantly used to spread terror by the warring forces. And any ceasefires that have been in place have quickly fallen apart. We're not, as far as I know, there's very little about this in the media. There is some. I was able to, glean some. CNN has done some coverage, which is positive. I don't know how much we can trust it. I did look to some other sources like the Gray Zone, didn't find much in there. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with the Gray Zone over CNN. What I would say, the Gray Zone is always very, very skeptical, very cynical with respect to corporate media, and with good reason. What I would say is that I'd like to look at if they take issue with what CNN and the Washington Post are reporting, the New York Times are reporting, I'd like to see that so I can see where the differences are and try to come to some kind of a conclusion on my own as to what I believe is likely. But I don't think there's really a lot of dispute. The situation is just absolutely awful it's anarchy, basically, in this area. It's terrible. It's terrifying. Here's a video that CNN put together. So I want to show you this. I'm just, I don't know what do you say? I mean, we're destroying our planet. We're destroying the people in it. There's no way to sugarcoat this stuff. There's no way to look at this and think there's something, defensible. And, I know many will say, well, it's not us. It's not the United States, but we're not stopping it. We're not. And what we are doing is exacerbating this. Here's what CNN has to say. And this is, by the way, will include, and I may stop at points where I have come to the conclusion that we, by virtue of our push for continuing warfare in Ukraine, are to a significant degree responsible for the devastation we are observing now in Sudan and Darfur.
Isolated incident. We received and reviewed dozens of cases where women say they were raped by RSF soldiers.
Right, so let me just, rapid support forces soldiers. So those are the military that this guy Hamdan is in charge of. And again, there's the competing warlords or the competing military leaders who are fighting for control of the region. And CNN, as is its wont, focusing on a very, I don't know what word you want to use, certainly something that's very, very upsetting. The use of rape is in war. And of course, that's what they're going to talk about or focus on.
Identifying them by their light-colored fatigues and the insignia on their right shoulders. So, who is complicit in this pain? The RSF's key ally, the notorious Russian mercenary group Wagner, has been sustaining their fight. And
all right, so I hope you can understand it. Her accent is pretty heavy, and also she doesn't speak that loudly, but what she's saying is that Wagner, the paramilitary Russian group Wagner, is pushing this, is helping the RSF, is helping the Hamdan warlord there in South Sudan, and helping them be armed so they can use their might to terrorize the people in the region.
Providing the impetus to slaughter innocent people by supplying arms. We're going to show you how. This is an Ilyushin 76 cargo plane operated by Wagner sitting at a Libyan airbase. A previous CNN investigation exposed how this Russian cargo plane...
I want to just stop that for one sec because that's relevant too. The cargo that, that includes the military weaponry, that is causing the carnage is being funneled through Libya by Russia and Wagner. So I want you to think about that also, because I'm going to return to Libya in a little bit.
Was providing the RSF with deadly arms from a Russian naval base in Latakia, Syria, via Wagner-controlled bases in Libya. This pattern starts just days before the war begins in Sudan. Libya, Syria, and back, and it picks up pace. What's interesting here is the new focus on the city
so
where
all
it goes
through
next,
April,
Bangui,
May
the capital of the
2023.
Central African Republic. After our exposure of the Libya route, a route directly from the Central African Republic into Darfur became crucial for the RSF. Eyewitnesses at key transit points and intelligence active in the region told CNN arms and supplies from this Aleutian transported overland using the truck captured here and others like it. First to a Wagner base in Birao, and then into South Darfur to an RSF base in Darfur. Wagner putting their thumb on the scales here to secure access to Sudan's resources through Darfur, creating chaos and terror, helping tip the balance of power in their war in Ukraine, whatever the cost.
All right, so you see right there what Wagner is doing, and this is done in a very I don't want to say melodramatic, but in a dramatic fashion by CNN, and doesn't seem like the sober kind of news you would get presented anyway, the sober news presentation you'd get on Democracy Now, for example. But it's what this seems consistent with everything else I've read about what's happening in the area. So there's no reason really to doubt that Wagner is supplying the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, in the region, and thereby fueling the carnage, the destruction, the rapes by Hamdan troops. And then, of course, the reprisals by al-Burhan. And as they just told you, as CNN just told you, this is being done to help fuel the war in Ukraine because, they're getting paid and they're using the money that they're getting, the Wagner's getting, and the control of resources like lithium that are in Sudan, using that to help fuel the war in Ukraine. And that they need, presumably, to fight against the American weaponry and the Western weaponry. Now, does this mean we should give Ukraine to Russia so they'll stop and Wagner will stop helping carnage, atrocities, murders, rapes in Sudan and Darfur? No, it means we should be fighting tooth and nail for peace in both places. But instead, we're using our resources to, increase the carnage, the deaths, in both Russia, Ukraine region, as well as in Africa. The chaos, the war, the fog of war is empowering the worst people. It's leading not just to atrocities in Central and Eastern Europe, but also in Africa. It's indefensible that we continue to supply one side, thereby prolonging this war, rather than doing everything we can to stop it. And we're not. Obviously, we're not. Some more information about how Wagner is benefiting is benefiting directly from this conflict, if you want to call it that, whatever word you want to use, in Russia, in Ukraine, how the war in Ukraine is fueling the violence. And I know I haven't talked about, I get it, I have not talked about the the abortive coup, right? Because the Wagner guy, I can't say his name, Prigozhin, was marching, it looked like, on Moscow, and then it never happened. I haven't talked about that. I don't think it's really relevant to this. There were maybe one or two people, a couple casualties. Ultimately, Wagner returned to Ukraine. Its forces return to Ukraine. So the killing continues. So I don't really have a lot. I don't really see a lot to that discuss there. Yes, Russia is possibly imploding, but I'm not sure that's good for anybody. I know some people think it's really good. I don't. We'll talk about that in a moment too, but let's just get into why this war in Ukraine is so bad for Africa and for the people in South Sudan, Darfur, and Sudan. So what we're seeing because of the war, because Russia has to remobilize, has to recruit to replace its casualties in Ukraine, and Wagner has to recruit. What they've done is gone into the Russian prisons and said to inmates there, hey, if you join Wagner, if you join this paramilitary outfit, or if you join the Russian army, then we'll let you out. We'll commute your sentence. And it's apparently such a lousy deal now that, as bad as the jails are, they may be better and safer than going out and getting shot at. Doesn't really surprise me. But of course, a lot of inmates will do anything, and understandably so, to get out of prison. So many have joined Wagner or the Russian army to get out of jail. It's a get out of jail free card. This program right now, what I'm concerned with, what I'm focusing on, are those who join Wagner. So according to the British estimates, 10,000 convicts may have signed up to get out of jail in April alone. And many of those joined Wagner. Prigozhin, the leader, has admitted he actively recruited inmates as early as last year. And although he said in February prisoners were no longer being used, it may be because the Russians now are signing up the inmates rather than the Russian army, rather than letting them go to Wagner. But many did, in fact, go to Wagner. And that's, by the way, from Newsweek. So I'm using multiple sources here because I know a lot of people question the credibility of one source or another. So I'm trying to use a lot of different sources to kind of demonstrate. And by the way, if you use Newsweek, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, that's not a lot of different sources. That's basically all one source. But here we are going to focus on another group, fpri.org, which I'm not super familiar with, but I believe they've got it's a nonprofit group that does a lot of work in Africa. So the inmates, the prisoners who were recruited by Wagner, it's taken up here by fpri.org. What next? This is April 2023, the Wagner Group's expanding global footprint. What next for them? And what are they going to do? So some may go back into organized crime, which basically is what they're involved in now. Others will continue in Wagner's other operations. Either way, these new recruits could have cascading effects on African instability because of the heavy footprint that Wagner now has there in Africa. And they are now being relied on by governments to try to keep Islamists and Islamist terrorists from taking power. So Burkina Faso, capital is Ouagadougou, is now saying we don't want France. We don't want French support. There's a country that has long had close ties to France. Burkina Faso, from a country that was cut out of Mali, was originally was colonized by France, and so they speak French, and the French have had a long involvement there. They're being told, the French, get out. We don't want you here. Can't really blame them for that. And France said, okay, fine, we'll get out. We don't want to be here anyway. That's fine with us. So the government is saying we have to protect ourselves somehow from these Islamists, the jihadists, the Janjaweed, who are the rapists. And it's, you obviously see these strange bedfellows because the Wagner is helping supply them and creating the chaotic conditions that, in fact, have empowered the jihadists, and yet at the same time, now they're being looked at. I mean, they're on both sides. It's a recipe for conflagration, basically. That's what our war, the endless war, the proxy war, is doing. It's empowering. It's giving increased prominence to this organization, and we're losing our ability to take them on, defang them through multilateral actions through the UN, which is the only force that could possibly restore some form of order. And of course, we've sidelined the United Nations, both in Europe in favor of NATO, and the NATO states acting purely out of their own self-interest and to maximize profits for their military and increase their military footprint and power and increase their business in Eastern Europe and sideline Russia. At the same time, it's a resource grab in Africa as well, with the United States, the West, meaning Western Europe, Russia, and China all getting involved. That's what the war in Ukraine is exacerbating, is worsening. You can't rely on corporate media in any way give you a good analysis. So I do rely on Newsweek because, yes, they're telling me something that is accurate. They're giving details about Wagner. But in terms of what we should do about it, in terms of how we should respond, I am not going to go to corporate media. Here's what The Atlantic has to say. Completely, recklessly, dangerously irresponsible. Anne Applebaum, invariably wrong. The case for the total liberation of Ukraine. Russia must be expelled from all Ukraine's territories, including Crimea. So she's looking at this war as a war of liberation. She's looking at this war as something to not just liberation, but actually a war against Russia. To take back territory she's mad that Russia seized back in 2014 in the wake of the coup that took Russia out of power, a Russian-backed president out of power. So Applebaum dreams of recovering Crimea, regardless of what the Crimea wants, regardless of how many people die. And here's her explanation for why this is the way to go. This is her explanation. Anything, anyone, any result is better than Putin. So she says, with regard to the counteroffensive that we're now watching stall, the counteroffensive that is not going well, I talked about this last week on Friday, she's saying, with regard to that, doesn't matter, the only thing that matters is whether it should succeed. We need it to succeed. It has to succeed. Whether Putin will use nuclear weapons or not, that fear, you have to ignore it because he probably won't. He probably won't because he knows that the response to this would have catastrophic consequences for Russia. But she says we've got to defeat and even crush Russia, notwithstanding what Macron says, because the worst successor imaginable, even the bloodiest general, will be immediately preferable to Putin because he will be weaker than Putin. All right, so what's wrong with that? And then she explains, and that weak but bloody general will have an intense power struggle. And that's better. That's better than Putin, who, as far as we know, hasn't been killing Russians, hasn't been involved in massacres in Russia. And we could have and should have gotten out of Ukraine, but didn't push for the ceasefire we needed to push. Didn't do that. So Applebaum says, I don't care. I don't care. I want an intense power struggle. I want a bloody general. Because what could go wrong? It's got to be better than Putin. What a strange and incredibly ignorant of history position that is. Again, what we're seeing is an establishment, elites, intellectual, I guess, quasi-intellectual elites like Anne Applebaum, cheerleading for endless war, for regime change, even, on the ground that it has to be better than what we have now. And this reflects such a complete ignorance of history. Not only of history, of contemporary affairs. We're seeing right now the direct fruits of power struggles, of weak, relatively weak, but bloody generals. We're seeing it in the carnage in Darfur and Sudan. That's exactly what will happen in Russia if there were a true power struggle. If indeed Putin were deposed, if Prigozhin had in fact successfully marched on Moscow and there was a bloody civil war, you would see the same horrors in Russia that we now see in Africa. And it's not even clear that this would end the war in Ukraine. It's far from clear of that either. Internal strife in Sudan between rival military forces hasn't stopped the outbreak of war in nearby regions. And we're fearing civil war across Arabia and Arabic countries and sub-Saharan Africa. So internal strife is not going to stop the world war that's brewing. It might, if it might exacerbate it, it might create it, it might cause it. So Applebaum claiming we need regime change is absolutely insane, and yet she's listened to. She's listened to. So let me give you another, before I want to play a video, because I played this before, but why your Democratic Party is not the answer. Why your even so-called progressives aren't the answer. When we have regime change, and even when we sort of, I guess, get rid of like a tin pot dictator, where have we done that lately? In many countries. But let me just move quickly, because this is the analogy. This is what Russia could look like. If we follow the Applebaum template. And I'm not saying it'll happen. But if we said we're going to get rid of Putin no matter what, and if there's a civil war between bloody generals, so be it. It's got to be better than Putin. So is Libya better? 9 years. This is from 2020, so 2.5 years ago. This article by the United States of Peace, another source. Are things better in Libya because of what we did? Because we deposed Gaddafi? Because we had to depose him. Remember, he was going to go door to door and kill everyone in Tripoli. That was the defense. We had to kill him. We came, we saw, we killed. He's dead. That was the Hillary Clinton gloat. So has this worked out? How well has this worked out? This is what Anne Applebaum wants to do to Russia. How well has this worked out? Well, 9 years after the fall of Gaddafi, by the way, he has so many different spellings. I haven't seen it spelled that way before. Libya continues to struggle to end its violent conflict and build state institutions. Meanwhile, Libya's borders remain porous, particularly in the southern Fezzan region. I assume that's, southern Libya, facilitating an increase in trafficking and smuggling of illicit materials, and including weapons. So the trafficking is of human beings. It's a center of slavery, slave trafficking. The smuggling of illicit materials, we already heard from the video from CNN. That's where Wagner is using, that's the area Wagner is using as a way station for the weapons that are coming from Russia into Sudan. Because Hillary Clinton killed, well, I mean, it wasn't Hillary, because she and Barack Obama and Panetta, because the democratic military industrial complex killed Gaddafi. That country, Libya, the country he lorded over, Libya, 13 years later, 12 years, 13 years later, is a vacuum. No one controls it, and it's an area where there's slavery, but also it's a way station now for weapons of mass destruction used to kill and rape in Sudan. That's what we did. That's what we did by destroying Libya. That's what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton did by destroying Libya. That's what Leon Panetta did by destroying Libya. So if you want to be a Democrat, if you want to say any blue will do, that they got to be better than the Republicans, you got to explain that. And trust me, I get it. The Republicans are awful too. But we need something different. This isn't working. I'll tell you something else that isn't working. This guy, you know what? I've been basically kicked out. As I understand it, the Our Revolution Maryland organizations largely, pushed me out. And I mean, I could push myself back in, but I really don't care. Has largely pushed me out because I gone after this guy right here. Supposedly some kind of a hero because he failed to impeach Trump. This hero is part of the reason we are seeing hundreds of thousands killed in Ukraine, and the war, the carnage in Africa has only gotten worse.
To act in politics is by definition to take responsibility not only for advancing your ideals, but also for trying to confront in different ways the many threads of injustice and cruelty that make up the fabric of our world.
All right, this is Jamie Raskin, of course.
I'm a member of Congress who's been an ardent champion of the people of Ukraine in their extraordinary struggle to defend their national sovereignty and their democracy against the lawless and bloody imperial aggression of Vladimir Putin.
All right, so look at how he's kind of smirking there. He even knows he's full of shit. He really does. He knows he's full of crap as he's saying this. But he's speaking to an audience that was handpicked to be, they picked themselves to give money for Lockheed Martin's sponsored event, militant conference to support endless war in Ukraine. So, he's smirking. He knows he's full of crap, but what the hell? Maybe he'll get a few, max out a few contributions.
The democratic nations and movements of the world and everyone supporting freedom and human rights and the rule of law have a deep interest in repelling and ending Russia's atrocity-filled aggression.
All right, so what about the atrocities? I mean, it's just so... I don't know what you do with that. I mean, yes, Russia is bad. We get it. That's no answer. The question is, what do we do? How do we end the violence? How do we tamp it down? How do we prevent people from killing, from dying? And Raskin's approach means more death, more dying. He is the wrong person to be the face of the Democratic Party or the progressive face of the Democratic Party.
Against the Ukrainian people. Ukraine must win in its struggle for freedom and democracy.
How many Ukrainians are you prepared to sacrifice, Raskin? How many are you prepared? Remember, this guy, because he's beloved by some progressives, I'm not supposed to even criticize him, or I'm canceled. I'm canceled from Our Revolution Maryland because I criticize Jamie Raskin. I don't think he deserves to be reelected. I think we need to support an alternative, hopefully a Green or a Democratic challenger who really is to the left of him.
And I've strongly advocated and voted for every form of assistance to Ukraine, economic, financial, military, security, strategic, humanitarian, diplomatic, and most of it has been in the form of military and security assistance.
All right, so let me stop it. So he just said it, military. So perpetuating the war, which is, as we've discussed, one of the big reasons that Wagner is so invested in Africa and is helping the forces, the militias there, the RSFs, the Rapid Support Forces that are killing, raping, rendering people homeless, kidnapping. That's what Jamie Raskin's helping to do. And he's saying, well, we have to, and to liberate Ukraine, really? Is that what's going to happen? How many Ukrainians are going to die for you to be satisfied that they're liberated, Jamie?
Billions of dollars to fight a just and defensive war against Putin's bloody attack.
Okay, so I'll go this far. Yeah, Putin initiated it. He shouldn't have attacked. But by saying it the way he does, he completely elides any responsibility that the West has for this war, which is great because of our expansion, because of our expansion ever eastward and in NATO, and because we've done everything possible to resist resist ceasefires.
The people of Ukraine. And yet, the fact that I'm a passionate champion for President Zelensky and Ukraine's side in Putin's war does not mean that I favor the unjust wars that we have fought and initiated, like the war in Iraq, which was built.
So I give him credit for that, but this is the problem. It's always easy to be against the last war, right? I mean, he's against the last war. Big deal. That doesn't cost Lockheed Martin a penny voting against the last war because there ain't no votes on the last war. There's only votes on the current war and the next war. Jamie Raskin's voting, he just said, for every single appropriation. We need all. The Democrat Party is not the answer. It's not the solution. It's not even less bad. It's not even less bad. Support Dr. Cornel West. Look for alternatives every chance you get. Do not vote for Democratic incumbent. It just puts us on a horrible, horrible merry-go-round. Of course, I'm not saying don't vote for Republicans. And I'll take that back a little bit. I suppose in cases where I don't know what to say because the Democratic majority has done so much harm just as I got nothing. I don't have a good answer. It really is right now almost a choice between Hitler and Stalin when you choose between the Democrats and the Republicans in many, many cases. It really, really is. All right, it's 12:47. I did want to play a video of a woman receiving her graduation diploma at Queens College. It's gone viral. She's responded very aggressive. She responded very aggressively to, I guess, a faculty member who had a microphone. And I think this is being viewed in very different ways by different groups of people. I have my own view, but what I'm more interested in is reducing the tensions between the different groups. Those who see the graduate as behaving appropriately, understandably, acceptably, perhaps even laudably, and those who see her behavior as utterly unacceptable. I have my own position, but what I'm more interested in is how to reduce the tensions, how to tamp down the aggression that is evident between two groups of people, both of which I think are sincere. In other words, those who revile the student, or the graduate, I should say, she graduated from Queens College, and those who applaud her. I want us to reconcile. I'll talk about that tomorrow. It's 12:49. Oh, one more point. Yeah, please click like, please click subscribe. You're not going to get this anywhere else. And I'll talk to you. You just call me and you get to talk to me. That's not the case for anybody else on media, as far as I can tell, on YouTube, live streamers. They don't talk to you very rarely, maybe a few once in a while. I'm always available for you. You see the number on the screen. Again, click like, click subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow and through this week, but I'll be off next week. I have a little to say about that as well, but this is going to be your last chance to satisfy your Halitics Jones for a while, meaning this week is.